Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride. And joining us this evening is Sam Payton from the Save Loch Lomond campaign.
Hello, thank you for having me this evening.
It's always a pleasure to have you, Sam. So our first story tonight is at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland today. Teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg warned that world leaders are still not taking the problem of climate change seriously enough. Speaking an hour after US President Donald Trump committed to a 1 trillion tree planting scheme, Thunberg said that planting trees was not enough while the president still supports the use of fossil fuels. Trump described climate activists as pessimistic and the heirs of yesterday's foolish fortune tellers. But Thunberg shot back, "You say children shouldn't worry, don't be so pessimistic." And then nothing, silence. Thunberg, who began her activism with climate strikes at school and then shot to international fame with powerful speeches to the UN and at Davos last year, has been in an ongoing battle with Trump, who has repeatedly insulted her via Twitter and in speeches and interviews. Thunberg's side of the argument was reinforced today when the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, told the Davos conference that following a ruling by the UN about a refugee from Kiribati, the world must now accept that climate refugees will be a growing problem across the world, and governments must prepare for the migration of millions of people that is likely to be one result of ongoing climate change. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Trump faces another challenge as the Senate debates the rules for his impeachment trial. Constitutionally, the Senate is required to hold a fair trial, but Republican Senator and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said he will not be an impartial juror and is working in lockstep with the White House to establish the precise rules of the trial. This has already meant restrictions on journalists watching events on the Senate floor, and today moves are expected to prevent witnesses being called, meaning the trial will amount to little more than a legal argument between House Democrats, acting as prosecutors, and Trump's legal team. That team includes Ken Starr, who led efforts to impeach Bill Clinton in the 1990s, and Alan Dershowitz, most famous for defending O.J. Simpson and more recently for his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. So first of all, Sam, this speech by Greta Thunberg, I mean, she's a phenomenon. She's a 16-year-old girl who is probably the leading climate change activist in the world. She's an absolute hero to my niece. My niece will not hear a word against her. She thinks Greta Thunberg is the greatest thing in the world.
She is certainly an anomaly. She has got the attention of world leaders where other climate activists have failed. Hats off to her. She's doing fantastic.
Do you think this will? What Greta Thunberg is doing is making a difference. I mean, we've always had young people interested in the environment. It's always been a young person's movement. And it does seem that a lot of people kind of age out of it. Do you think Greta Thunberg is going to have a more lasting impact? Hopefully.
I think we don't age out of it. I think what we do is we get caught up in life. I think a lot of us young, older folk, when we're being environmental activists, when we're being younger, we get caught up in everyday life, other things, and we start some of us staying within the environmental
people like you, for example.
Yeah, and other people kind of move on and they start kind of going off to other forms of activists work, whether it's to do with refugees, all sorts of things. We're still there. I think the kind of grassroots kind of grows around the environmental issues, because I think my very first it was basically a farming transport issue when I was 12 years old. So it's gone way back, many moons ago. But however, I think a lot of people, that's where they start and then they move on to other issues. But we've still always got that. Greta is an anomaly. I think Trump and things, when he is criticising her and being quite, I don't know, the things he says on Twitter and things about her, that says more about him than it does about her. He's a grown man. He's meant to be a world leader.
And yet he's threatened by this 16-year-old girl.
That says more about him as a person. Yeah. And I think the fact that she is capable of standing up to him and standing there and giving her opinion, regardless of what he thinks. Good on her. Keep going.
And this announcement by the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, this was a decision based on in New Zealand. This refugee from Kiribati, an island nation in the Pacific, basically saying my home is no longer livable. I think they'd been living on the beach, and the rising water level has just made it impossible for them to stay. New Zealand had initially said, no, you're not escaping war or torture or anything like that. But the UN has ruled that actually no, climate change is a legitimate reason for people to be refugees. And now this is going to affect world governments all over the world.
The UN's correct, because climate change is having a devastating effect around the world. We're seeing changes in our weather, rising tides. I mean, look what's happened with Australia. You know, that's just a classic example of all the bushfires. We are seeing it. Yes, it is. I mean, being a refugee is not about just about war. It's about other factors, which is climate change. And if these small islands or countries and nations which are along the kind of oceans and seas and things, they are going to become, to a point, they're going to become inhabitable, and we're going to have to deal with that, and world leaders are going to have to start dealing with this. And it is going to add to the problem we already have of world leaders not accepting refugees from war-torn countries. So they are going to have to, as I say, bang their heads together. They need to sit down and have this chat. Yeah,
there's a film I saw, a documentary film I saw a wee while ago about the president of the Maldives, who was saying, you know, the water level only needs to rise a few centimetres and the Maldives will just cease to exist. It will disappear. It's very, very low to the water. So yeah, it's clearly going to be a problem. And just very quickly, what do you make of the events in the Senate? This idea that a fair trial is simply not going to happen.
I'm just going to repeat what I keep saying. To me, it's like a theatrical production. It's just to turn around and say, you know, they can't decide whether witnesses are going to be called or not called or whatever. I'm just going to keep watching it and see what happens. But it's a bit of a joke, really.
Yeah. Anyway, moving back to London, Boris Johnson's government faced more defeats in the House of Lords today over amendments to the Brexit bill. Last night, peers voted for a physical document to be available to EU citizens given settled status. And this afternoon, Johnson suffered his fourth defeat in the Lords in just 2 days as peers voted in favour of an amendment tabled by Alf Dubs to ensure that the Brexit bill commits to keeping in place protections to reunite unaccompanied child refugees with their families in the UK. Stuart MacDonald MP, the SNP's shadow immigration spokesperson, said, "The amendment brought forward by Alf Dubs is a vital provision that seeks to protect some of the world's most vulnerable children. Any move by Boris Johnson to overturn the Dubs Amendment, which seeks to allow unaccompanied child refugees to be reunited with their families in the UK, would be callous and cruel, and the Prime Minister would be guilty of abject moral failure." In stark contrast to the Tories' dire record, the SNP Scottish Government welcomed the 2,000th Syrian refugee at the end of 2017, meeting its vulnerable person resettlement scheme target 3 years ahead of schedule. However, we can and must do more to help refugees and address this crisis. I mean, again, this issue of refugees coming up, and as you said a minute ago, governments just not wanting to do the right thing by them. So it's... We always argue against the existence of the House of Lords, but at times like this, sometimes it's almost a blessing in disguise, isn't it?
It is, it's one of those ones I don't like to admit that they're a blessing in disguise, But they've done the right thing for once. Yes, regarding refugee, I mean, children for a start, when it comes to children, they need to be back with their families. If they've got families here, they've got to be allowed to come over. They have got to be. They've got to get counselling, they've got to get medical support, psychological support, everything. That's all got to be in play. The thing is, my biggest fear, and I know a lot of people go, oh, no, you know, they're not our problem. They are our problem. And what I'm always aware of, if you're going to turn around and say to children, no, you're not welcome here, what effect does that have long term to their mental stability? because then if they end up growing up in an area with refugee camps and things like that, you're fueling a hatred. You're starting to fuel that negative, these thoughts and things, which it leads on to other things, which you don't want. You want to stop that at a young age, and you want them to feel welcome. They're at home. They're safe. They're trusted, and that is how you build a loving and caring society, which we're quite lucky. We've got a majority of that in Scotland, with the type of people we are, and this is what you want to build on. You want that loving, caring society. You want these children to grow up in this loving, caring society, to know they're accepted, and we're going to welcome them with open arms and get them all the help that they need and they require, because you don't know what they have witnessed. And as a child, they don't have. As an adult, we have we have certain choices we can make, but as children, they don't. They don't have their choices, and they can find themselves in situations that no child could ever find themselves in, and not being able to. So I believe, definitely the House of Lords is definitely made the right move there.
And it's worth bearing in mind as well. One of the big triggers for the Syrian civil war was climate change.
Exactly.
It was an ongoing drought. People weren't able to provide food and water for themselves, and that's one of the things that led to the crisis in Syria. So all these stories all tie together. And the other really interesting thing, one of the things that EU Citizens for Independence, our friend of the show, Ellen Hofer, has been campaigning hard for this idea of a physical document. At present, there's just a database which the public don't have access to, and there was an argument saying, well, we need something that we can show to employers, that we can show to any public services, landlords that are trying to find ways to discriminate against us. And again, this was something that the government didn't want to do, and the Lords has said they will have to do. So I think that's something as well that we really have to welcome.
Yeah, it's a positive thing as well. Because the thing is you will get employers, landlords, all these people who are you're going to come up against some sort of prejudice there. They need something. I think it's disgusting we've came to that. That people need to prove they have got a right to be here. But unfortunately, that's the way it's gone, and we need to deal with that, and we need to deal with it as sensitively as possible. And to give them some sort of documentation to say, I'm allowed to be here, I'm allowed to work here. It hopefully will stop a lot of problems for a lot of people.
Also on Brexit news, the Parliaments and Assemblies of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have now all refused to give legislative consent to the UK government bill that's set to take the UK out of the EU at the end of this month. The devolution settlement normally requires the devolved legislatures to give consent before Westminster can legislate on devolved areas, but the UK government has previously argued in court that Brexit is not a normal situation and therefore legislative consent is not required. A recent report by the Institute for Government warned that Brexit has put devolution under serious strain and confirmed that Brexit negotiations and the accompanying legislative process have seriously undermined an already fragile relationship between the devolved administrations and Westminster. SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown said, by ignoring the Scottish Parliament and assemblies in Wales and Northern Ireland, the Tories have made it crystal clear they do not see the UK as a partnership of equal nations. The contempt shown to devolution throughout this disastrous Brexit process demonstrates the arrogance of this Tory government. People in Scotland have the right to choose a better future as an independent European nation, rather than be subjected to a Tory government that has no mandate in Scotland. And I mean, this is a story that's been ongoing now for years. I think it's almost 2 years now since that court case where they argued that the Sewell Convention, which we had been promised back in 2014, would be made solid, wouldn't be able to be overrun. But that sneaky wee word normally was left in there, meaning that they've been able to just run roughshod over all three devolved legislatures.
doesn't surprise me. Does it surprise you, really?
Not very much,
no. To be honest, I would have, it's pretty much what I expected from this Tory government. And also, no, it does not surprise me. As far as they're concerned, we definitely are not equals in this union. They have the final say. Yeah, it's pretty much how they view Scotland and Ireland and Wales, really. It's, you know, we kind of answer to them, and if they say, then yes, we're meant to bow and agree and smile. But again, yeah, no, it's very much doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I sometimes think we maybe need to tell the Tories that no means no.
No, exactly. Yes. Do you remember that old phrase? No means no. Yes. Maybe we should re-resurrect that phrase. No means no. Yeah.
Well, that's been their mantra for ever since 2014. It would be nice if they sometimes remembered it in other circumstances. The SNP has said that Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack must explain why the Tory government is wasting taxpayers' money after a Freedom of Information request revealed huge and indefensible increases in spending on the zombie department. SNP Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland, Mary Black MP, said the Scotland office had become redundant with devolution and was now little more than a Tory propaganda front. The Freedom of Information request revealed overall spending has risen by almost 50% from just under $5 million in 2014 to almost $7.5 million in 2018-19. Spending on communications has nearly tripled, rising from $500,000 in 2014 to almost $1.5 million in 2019. And spending on spin doctors has soared, with the total number of Scotland Office communication staff rising from 6 in 2011 to 15 last year. The total number of Scotland Office staff has risen by 45%, from 58 in 2011 to 79 last year. The department has spent increasing amounts of public money on social media promotion, paid-for listings in search results and other advertising, with expenditure rising from 0 in 2014 to 58,000 last year. Commenting, Mary Black said, "It beggars belief that the Tory government has been wasting millions of pounds on taxpayers' cash on huge and indefensible increases in spending on this zombie department. Westminster's Scotland office has become utterly redundant since devolution and is now little more than a Tory propaganda front, with Scottish taxpayers left to foot the bill." And this, I think it's particularly surprising to look at the comparison between the figures in 2014, when the UK government was fighting for the very survival of their country, and yet now we're 5 years later, almost 6 years later, we're seeing massively increased spending on essentially propaganda. Big spending on advertising, communications, and spin. What is the purpose of the Scotland office these days?
I don't know. That's a good question. What is the purpose? Does anybody actually know? As Mary Black says, probably propaganda. It's a zombie office. I didn't actually know it still existed. That's the thing. I didn't actually know until we came in tonight. I thought now with the devolved government that was just a wee office somewhere that, I didn't actually realise it was a thing, a department and things like that, but never mind. But no, basically, to me, the spending increase shows how much fear they're in of Scottish independence. Basically, what they're doing is they're trying to offset Scottish independence movement and the word spreading, because it is propaganda. That's what it is. It's the good old-fashioned propaganda tool. The more you see the independence gaining stronger and stronger and stronger, as we have done in the last 6 years, the more you can see they're spending money. And that's what it is. They're frightened. They know fine well that we are getting stronger as a nation. And if it's costing us money, as taxpayers, again, it's deliberate. It's deliberate. It's a way of forcing us for our taxes to pay for something that we don't really want. Again, it's just pure propaganda and spin.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that the Tory charge against the SNP is that they never stop talking about independence, when in actual fact, for most of the last 5 years, the SNP has not been pressing very hard for independence,
It's
while the
been-
Tories
yeah.
have never stopped
They're
campaigning.
the ones that keep talking about it, and it's the grassroots that keep talking about independence. It's grassroots activists. You'll know yourself on social media. You know, there's a big grassroots there. Yeah, it's people themselves. As you say, SNP's not quite. They're there, and we know they're there. But it's the Tories that keep going on and on and on. And really, they're doing the independence movement wonders. It's great. You know, I'm quite happy for them to keep going on about independence and moaning about it, because they are actually growing the campaign. Yeah, I think they're actually quite scared.
Yeah.
I think they're actually quite scared.
I think that would explain it. Anyway, back in London again, and Jess Phillips has pulled out of the Labour leadership contest to replace Jeremy Corbyn, saying she is not the person to unite the party. Her decision, just 2 weeks into the campaign, came as she failed to secure any union or affiliate backing, although she did secure 23 nominations from MPs to put her into the current phase of the contest. Earlier today, Phillips failed to attend a hustings organised by the GMB union, leading to speculation that her campaign was faltering. And then in a message to supporters, the MP for Birmingham Yardley said, "The Labour Party will need to select a candidate who can unite all parts of our movement, the union movement, members and elected representatives. And I have to also be honest with myself, as I said I always would be throughout this campaign." Meanwhile, Lisa Nandy, who has said the UK government should follow Spain's example in Catalonia to deal with the Scottish independence movement, won the endorsement of the GMB union. Keir Starmer confirmed his place on the final ballot after receiving the support of the USDAW retail union. And Rebecca Long-Bailey is also expected to be on the ballot after getting the backing of the Momentum Group, as well as Unite and the Communication Workers Union. Emily Thornberry has yet to receive any union or affiliate support. So, do you suspect that any of these people is going to be able to be the candidate to unite the Labour Party?
I don't think any of them will actually unite the Labour Party. I don't think, it doesn't matter who becomes the leader of Labour, I don't think any of those candidates are going to work well in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca Long-Bailey is the only one who has said that an independence referendum could be agreed to.
However, it's okay saying that at this stage, as we know in politics, they will say things to get nominated and get voted in. But what's going to happen if she does win the leadership contest? You know, is she going to keep to that? Or is it going to be a backtrack? Yeah,
and of course the Scottish Party is significantly more hardline on this, and they're definitely going to be putting their oar in.
Exactly. So no, I think Labour as a whole are in trouble. I think they have been in trouble for quite a long time. You've got the Blairites, and then you've got the other side of the party, and they're just clashing. They're just all clashing at the moment, and they have been for quite a number of years now. I don't think any of those candidates are going to bring it together. And as I say, I don't think any of them are going to do any favours for Scotland either.
And do you suspect that even if they can't necessarily unite the party very effectively, what sort of challenge do you think any of them can put up to Johnson and the Tory government?
I don't think they can. Because I think Labour have lost their way. I mean, Labour was always the party of the workers, the unions. They have lost their way. They've become more towards the Tory party. They've become more towards them. I can remember when I was growing up, when I was younger, you know, it was all as a working class. It was always Labour, Labour, Labour. That's who stood up for our rights. That was who were there to protect us. They've lost that. They've lost, my opinion. I know a lot of people will disagree with me. I believe they've lost that. They've lost, and especially up here in Scotland, they've definitely lost that. They seem to be more towards the big corporations, the big business, the big money. They seem to have lost their grassroots. I know there's still a lot of candidates in Labour who are very much grassroots, but I think the ones in the hierarchy are more corporate, more business focused. So as a voter, why would somebody working class vote for them? But then again, we see at the general election, why would somebody working class vote for Tory? Which happened,
Yeah.
which is beggars belief. But yeah, it's a strange world we're in at the moment. It's a strange political setting that we're in at the moment, especially when you are seeing working class voting Tories and things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see who actually comes out, how this is going to progress. I think if Nandi gets, yeah, that'll be interesting in Scotland. I think she's already kind of put a nail in her coffin for Scotland in terms with her comments. They were
Yeah, I
quite,
mean,
whether
it's
very
one- it's one-
foolish, very foolish, very, yeah, I don't think she had thought of that one through.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange thing. I think it was Jess Phillips who was getting advice on Scotland from Ian Murray and then from Blair McDougall.
Yes.
Which kind of suggests that she's not going to know how to. She was never going to figure out Scotland. Ian Murray is very successful in his wee posh Edinburgh constituency, but has the Labour Party has lost Scotland.
They have. They have lost. I mean, at the general election, you can see that. You can see it even kind of local levels, the way people talk about Labour. There is some Labour, the odd Labour candidate, whether they're an MSP or a councillor, who are particularly good at what they do, and some people still hold them in a certain kind of level of respect, but the majority of them, they're a done party now. They really are done in Scotland. They would need to reinvent themselves totally, break away from the main party, register in Scotland and just reinvent themselves, because at the moment it's not working for them. Definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, we will need a Labour Party. We will need a
yes.
left-wing party in
do.
an independent Scotland, and even now we need that kind of voice. But
Yeah. I mean, I know many Labour supporters who are very much independence supporters, and the party is not recognising that. They need to start to recognise that there is quite a big independence movement within the Labour Party. They might be a bit more silent, but they're there because they're frightened to speak out.
Yeah.
They're a bit wary of speaking out.
Yeah, the party just seems to always have struggled with the idea that independence was, by and large, a working class movement, particularly in the Central Belt where Labour was strongest.
Yes. I mean, I know with part of the campaign, we've went along to the marches and things, and we have actually had people who were die-hard no voters and very much Labour supporters, and who have come along to the marches, and once they've been at the marches and they actually start speaking to people, their whole point of view has totally turned, and they now go to all the marches as individuals, because what people think the independence movement is, and then once they experience it and they talk to people and they see how we want the future of Scotland, they're like, wow, that's what we want.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
Yeah, I mean, there's just such a huge disconnect between what the media and the English political parties say about independence versus what the actual grassroots are saying.
Yes.
Anyway, back in Scotland, we've got a few interesting statistics stories here. Unemployment in Scotland fell slightly in the last quarter of 2019, but employment growth is still slow, according to statistics released today by the Office of National Statistics. That's a lot of times to say statistics. Business Minister Jamie Hepburn responded saying, unemployment fell over the quarter by 0.3 percentage points and remains low by historical standards. However, these latest employment statistics signal that Brexit is continuing to negatively impact employment in Scotland and that there is work to do to reduce inactivity and increase employment in our labour market. That is why the Scottish Government is working hard through its investment in employability services, including Fair Start Scotland, to provide the right support to move those furthest from our labour market into work. So have you noticed an uptick in employment? Have you?
Try not to sound too negative here. Yes, employment is moving, but what I'm finding is, what I've seen locally, it's more low quality jobs rather than skilled jobs. we need to be moving more towards skilled workers, focusing on that. Down our neck of the woods, a lot of it is the tourist industry,
Of course,
which
yeah.
is quite difficult because it's seasonal. It can involve quite a lot of zero-hour contracts, uncertainty. So you normally find that people down my way normally have 2 or 3 jobs. It's not just one job. So from that point of view, yes, it's good that unemployment is falling, but to what means is it falling? Is it low-end jobs, or is it more? I would like to know more in the terms of the figures. But yeah, anything to help people get back into employment, especially people that have been long-term unemployed, is always a positive move.
I think that's definitely where the Scottish Government is going.
Yeah.
But as you say, if you're on a 0 hours contract, you're counted as employed even if you get 0 hours.
Yeah.
That's one of the challenges of statistics now, is that if we were looking at unemployment, say 30 years ago, the vast majority of those jobs would have been full-time,
contractual
permanent
work,
jobs.
permanent jobs. Whereas now it's a lot of
gig jobs, a lot of 0 hours contracts.
especially down our neck of the woods,
Yeah.
where it's high tourism. It is very much seasonal. So you do get families having 2 or 3 jobs, which is quite a shame.
And on that note, some more new statistics released by the Chief Statistician today show rising household wealth in recent years, while wealth inequality remained high. According to the latest data, households in Scotland had just over £1 trillion in personal wealth in 2016 to 2018. Recent wealth growth since 2010 to 2012 was caused mainly by rising pension wealth. Wealth inequality was more severe than income inequality. The 2% of households with the highest incomes had 9% of all income, while the wealthiest 2% of households had 15% of all wealth. After a previous decline, wealth inequality has been largely stable since 2010. A typical household in the wealthiest 10% of households had £1.6 million in total wealth, whereas a typical household in the least wealthy 10% had £7,500. The least wealthy households rarely own property or have any private pension savings. Their wealth is mainly made up of the value of their possessions, such as clothing or furniture. And I think that is really remarkable. £7,500 of clothing and furniture is the average wealth of the bottom 10% of Scots, while this 1.6 million for the top 10%. As it says, that is very largely based on owning a home. Older people certainly are much more wealthy than younger people because they paid off their mortgages. But that is still a pretty substantial gap, isn't it?
It is, and also as well, that will be an average. So there'll be people above the highest figure there, and there'll be people below the 7,500. That will be an average throughout. It is quite staggering. In terms of wealth rising, and certainly at the highest, the top end, Yeah,
but like you said, it's not.
When you come down,
it's not coming to those at the bottom.
It's not filtering through to those. They are struggling more. I was having a conversation yesterday with one of my friends, and we were talking about people in their 30s nowadays compared to when we were in our 30s, and what they earn now. We were earning more than that when we were in our 20s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for normal everyday, normal working class people, and even the middle range, it is becoming very, very difficult. And we seem to, I think somebody needs to get a new job, sitting there doing statistics all the time and working that out. I think they need to get out into the real world and actually go and visit people and actually see how wealth is distributed.
I mean, on a personal note, I graduated in 2001. And since then, I've never held a permanent job. I've never had a permanent. Every job I've had has been temporary. And in most circumstances, temporary jobs don't let you join the pension scheme. You're not even able to join the union in most cases. So that what we were talking about there with the temporary jobs and gig jobs, 0 hours contracts, it all feeds into the lack of pensions, which is going to lead to a huge poverty problem, 30, 40 years from now.
Yeah, it's the same with myself from a personal. I'm self-employed. And many of my friends are self-employed, but we're probably the lower end of the self-employment rather than the high end.
Yeah.
It's more of lifestyle choices rather than make loads of money. But yes, we're not entitled to sick pay, we're not entitled to holiday pay, so if we're not physically working, we're not making money.
Yeah. And you're not usually entitled to any benefits.
You're not entitled to benefits,
either,
you're not entitled to, you become a kind of anomaly in the system. So yeah, you're classified as working. But sometimes, because we always have these conversations and we're like, but it's more of a lifestyle choice, and most of us that are in that level of self-employment is a lifestyle choice. It's not because, we could go and get another job and whatever, but we still pay our taxes, we still pay into the system, we still pay into the economy. But we don't have extravagant lifestyles. I'm an environmentalist, I'm always about recycling and upcycling and things like that. And it's just about a quality of life and getting the balance between life and family. But not everybody is lucky enough to be in my situation.
No.
They are in the dead-end jobs and, maybe do 2 and 3 jobs to survive, or like temporary work where they can't pay into pensions and things. I think these statistics are quite dangerous, and it gives people. Yes, it's good for the wealthy for them to look and go, yeah, the country's doing fine or whatever. But when it's people at the bottom, I think it makes them start thinking, oh, what are we doing wrong? Because according to them, we should be earning or we should be doing this, and we don't. And I think it's. These statistics, they can be quite dangerous sometimes, depending who's reading them, and you've got to be careful. But somebody's got a great job to sit there and work out statistics.
There's one other wee note here, which kind of sums up some of what we were saying there. 1/3 of households had insufficient savings to cover basic living costs for 3 months in the event of an emergency. 3% of households were in unmanageable debt. 1/3 of households had no property wealth, and almost 1/5 of households had no private pension wealth. And that just sums up pretty much what we've just been saying. Yeah. In more statistics, the chief statistician...
He's been busy. He has been busy.
Been a very, very busy day. The chief statistician has released figures on fuel poverty, energy efficiency, and the condition of housing. The Scottish Housing Quality Standard, and other key descriptors of the occupied housing stock in Scotland. This publication provides the first release of information from the Scottish House Condition Survey for the year January to December 2018. In 2018, the level of fuel poverty remained similar to 2017. 25% of households were fuel poor, with 11.3%, or 279,000 households, living in extreme fuel poverty. This compares to the 23.7% who were in fuel-poor households in 2017, with 11.9% living in extreme fuel poverty. There's been little change in the fuel poverty rate over the past 3 years, but there has been a reduction from the peak of 31.7% in 2013. Levels of extreme fuel poverty have been decreasing since that peak in 2013 of 16%. In 2018, 43% of Scottish homes were in the highest energy efficiency bands of C or better, and half had an energy efficiency rating of 67 or higher. So some improvements, but still to have almost about 1/4 of people living in Scotland still in fuel poverty, and more than 10% in extreme fuel poverty is still a really serious problem, isn't it?
It certainly is, but first of all, I think that chief statistician needs to go and get a life. He must have been quiet over Christmas and New Year. No, seriously, it's still too many. It's still too many, especially with the type of climate we live in. In the West Coast, it's a very damp climate. So even in days where it can be quite mild, you still need the heating on, just to combat dampness and condensation, which can then lead on to health problems.
Yeah.
And if you've got very vulnerable people, elderly people are sick, young children, babies, that's not good. That is not good. They need... Fuel poverty, yeah, it's a tough one. It's hard, especially in a country where we've got so many resources. We shouldn't really have that any kind of level. I know, going by the fuel poverty strategy of 2018, I organised, I wrote it down.
Did
there
your
we
research?
go.
Well done.
By 2040, they're hoping to eradicate it, but they recognise 5% of households will always be in fuel poverty, and that's due to changing circumstances, changing jobs, these kind of situations, which you're never going to eradicate completely. But I think with the resources that we've got in Scotland, I think even in this day and age, today, it's terrible we've got anybody in fuel poverty. But you do see it. I mean, I used to manage a charity shop way back in 2009 and 10, and we used to have volunteers coming in the winter because they could not afford to heat their homes, or they couldn't afford the electricity, or to get a hot meal and things. So we used to, come in. Doesn't matter if you're not going to volunteer in the shop today, but come and get a heat and have a blether and put the kettle on, and and things like that, and just make them welcome. The thing is, because we're doing away with a lot of our community centres and our libraries and things like that,
there are fewer places for people to go.
Fewer places for people to go, and also as well, it leads into the kind of loneliness and mental health as well. But what you do see, and not all cafes, restaurants and that will welcome people to come in and just sit there all day with a coffee, because they want to kind of get the tables moving and getting people through the door. So that's when you start seeing people heading to the pub and sitting in the pub all day. So fuel poverty leads on to other problems. It's not just about the fuel. Then it's a choice between eating or heating, which is wrong as well. And it's not even about heating. If you've not got enough money to put in your electricity, where do you store your medication in your fridge if you can't have that running? There's a lot of different factors. It's good to see that the fuel poverty strategy, they're looking to eradicate, but unfortunately you're always going to have that, what they're saying, that 5% of households. But I think in this day and age, 2020, we should already be there. We really should already be there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of these statistics do tie together. These issues of underemployment, of people having unpredictable incomes, of people who don't have decent pensions. It all ties together, and unfortunately, most of those issues are reserved matters.
Yeah, they are.
Controlled by a particularly heartless Tory government over the last 10 years.
One of the worst ones is universal credit. The way people get sanctioned.
Even the wait that you have to get to start universal credit is punishing.
Diabolical. I've got a son of 26, and he was sanctioned for 4 months, and he had to move back home because he couldn't afford.
You just got nothing.
Nothing. He couldn't afford at all. So he had to move back home. And I had to put up with a 26-year-old all again. Oh, it's great fun. It's how the tables turn. It's amazing when you're getting a eye off your 26-year-old, for being messy and not doing dishes and things. But on the serious note, he should never have had to do that.
No.
Nobody should have to live like that.
No.
That, to me, is like modern slavery. It's that modern way of keeping people down, and and again, it fuels into mental health. It fuels into all sorts of other issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons that several of us here at Broadcasting Scotland are such keen supporters of something like universal basic income.
Yes, definitely.
Where there's just a guarantee that you'll have something at the end of every month, that you'll be able to, as you say, put a fiver in the meter, buy something to eat. It makes a huge difference.
It certainly does.
Anyway, in other news, responding to the announcement that the NHS Lothian Chief Executive Tim Davison is to retire later this year, Health Secretary Jeane Freeman said, "Tim Davison's career within the NHS has spanned the last 37 years, and I'd like to wish him the best for his retirement. Before Tim leaves, steps will be taken to recruit his successor. This will enable us to put the necessary arrangements in place to ensure continuity of service and the best possible health and social care for the people of Lothian." And this, we wouldn't normally report on the retirement of a civil servant, but the Lothian Health Board has had some real difficulties recently with the building of the new hospital. There's been no direct link. It's not like he's stepping down in shame over that. He is close to retirement age. But there's been some discussion about a change in the culture being needed at NHS Lothian. Do you think do you think a new leader can change everything?
Sometimes
make it
it's
all better?
always good to have new and fresh eyes. It doesn't matter how good a previous leader or chief executive has been, because I think he was the chief exec for 8 years, wasn't it? Something like that. Yeah. Things are always changing, and I think it's always good to have fresh, new eyes. Because the NHS is changing, NHS Scotland is changing. What can I say? I mean, the fact with the everything that's happened. I know he was considering quitting about 3 months ago, but he didn't. At the end of the day, the man's about to retire. Good luck to him.
Good luck to him indeed.
Yeah, enjoy his retirement.
And we do just have one more statistical story. Dental Statistics NHS Registration and Participation was published today, showing that record levels of Scots are registered with a dentist. Public Health Minister Joe Fitzpatrick said, "It's very encouraging to see that a record number of people in Scotland are registered with an NHS dentist. Substantial investment by the Scottish Government, along with actions taken by NHS boards, means that nearly twice as many people were registered for NHS dental services at September 2019 than was the case in September 2007. Improving people's dental health can contribute greatly to well-being, but they need to be able to access NHS dental services. Having your teeth actually checked is key." So while the majority of the population visited a dentist in the last 2 years, I'd urge everyone to ensure they take regular advantage of their right to a free dental check. And this is the bit of the show where I try and hide my teeth.
Yeah, that's when everything goes
from the cameras. It's very good news. We've heard for most of my life, we've heard people saying there aren't enough people registered with dentists. In a lot of cases, there aren't enough dentists for people to register with. So the fact that there is now this new record high is got to be good news.
It's got to be good news, definitely. The dentist, the dreaded dentist, oh my goodness, many nightmares when I was growing up. Yeah, it is, and it's good because it's very important to people's well-being because there's a lot of health issues that can be picked up from it. Same with an optician. There's a lot of things that can be picked up quite quickly. And also as well, just confidence as well. If your teeth, mine's don't look too quick, too close. But no, I think when you see the younger generations, they're a lot more conscious about their teeth. I think our generation's a bit, it's character. I've got squint teeth, so what? It's character. But yeah, the younger generations are very particular about their teeth, and and the braces, and their teeth are beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I think it's a good thing. But I think one of the things with me personally, my kids were always registered with a dentist from literally babies. Yeah. Because it's amazing what can be picked up, even with just gums.
Absolutely,
Even before the teeth come in. And it's good because they get used to somebody touching their mouth, and they get over the fear. Yeah. Whereas I was terrified. I still am terrified of the dentist. I'm one of the worst. I go when I really need to go, and the rest of the time I'm like, no. And that's why I done that, because I grew up with a fear of the dentist, and I didn't want my kids to grow up. So, but yeah, it's always good. It's a good news story, definitely.
And just finally, another good news story. Legislation to establish a Scottish National Investment Bank has been passed unanimously by the Scottish Parliament. The new institution will direct investments that deliver economic, environmental and social returns and help Scotland's journey towards net zero carbon emissions. It will aim to increase innovation, give support to small and medium-sized enterprises, and build a high-tech and inclusive economy. The bank is expected to be operational before the end of this year. It will have an initial capitalisation of £2 billion over 10 years, with the aim that it will ultimately become self-financing. Economy Secretary Derek Mackay said, "The Scottish National Investment Bank has the potential to transform Scotland's society by powering innovation and building a high-tech, inclusive economy. Most importantly of all, the bank's primary mission will be to face up to the global climate emergency by accelerating the just transition to net zero carbon emissions. Harnessing private sector activity to achieve this has never been more important. We know from the experience of other countries that national investment banks can deliver real change, but this impact will not be delivered overnight. It will require determination, patience and support from partners right across Scotland. In passing this bill today, the Scottish Parliament has taken the crucial first step towards creating an institution that is commercially minded and also publicly accountable to the people of Scotland." And again, this is something that we've been talking about in Scotland for a number of years. It's something that, for example, Commonweal have lobbied very, very hard for. They see it as a way to open up new kinds of business and to support new kinds of investment in Scotland. Do you think this is going to be the great success that, I mean, there's a wee bit of kind of management buzzwords in there, but do you think it is going to make a big difference to the economy?
I would love it to make a big difference to the economy. I would love it to be successful, but time will tell. We just need to sit back and see. And I think, yeah, patience, he's right, you know, patience, determination, that's what will determine whether it's going to be successful or not. But to be publicly accountable, that's the main thing. It's got to be publicly accountable to the people of Scotland. Yeah, I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't wait. I'm not excited.
I'm just hopeful. It's talking about social goals, environmental goals, as well as just making money, which is part of the whole
pioneering as well.
Yeah, it's part of the whole sort of well-being economy agenda that Nicola Sturgeon has been leading the world on. In fact, so yeah, it'd be really good to see if this can start to create more better jobs.
Yes.
The same thing we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
If that could be a condition of investment bank funding, is that actually, no, you have to produce good jobs with pension benefits.
It would be good to see that they would have these all tied into the Scottish National Living Wage, and, you know, have proper contracts and things like that. That would be, you know, if they were going to invest in these kind of businesses, that's how the economy will grow. And it keeps, it would be really good. It would be really exciting and interesting to see how this progresses. But yeah, it needs to be beneficial to the people of Scotland. There's no point doing the buzzwords and things if it's going to be another one of those banks. It needs to keep to that agenda, and that's the thing about us in Scotland. We're very pioneering. I can't even speak. Get the teeth back in. That's because we're talking about the dentist there. You know, we are certainly leaders in a lot of things. So it'd be good to see that happening with a bank. You know, where, you know, if we're going to invest in businesses, and there's got to be certain conditions. It
turns out you can be a somewhat ethical banker. That would be a nice thing to discover,
it would be good,
wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
Anyway, that is all we've got time for tonight. So thank you very much to Sam for joining us.
Thank you.
It is always a pleasure. And thank you for joining us as well. It's always good to have an audience. It would be kind of daft to be doing these shows if we didn't. We would like to say, though, it's always an expensive business making TV programmes. Keeping the lights on here at the studio costs quite a lot of money, and we can't do it without your support. So if you are able to support us at all, please do go to the address on the bottom of the screen there. It's broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up as a supporter. Your £5 a month will make a huge difference to the quality, the quantity and the kind of programmes that Broadcasting Scotland can give you. We want to become a full-service, full-time TV station, bringing you all the best of Scottish culture, Scottish news, Scottish sport. We want to be able to do all of that. We can only do it with your support, though. So if you are able to, please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up as a supporter there. If you can't, please don't worry. The shows will always be available for free online. You're always welcome to watch if you can't afford it. But if you can afford it, chip in so that those of us who can't afford it can still enjoy the shows. So thank you once again to Sam. Thank you again to you for joining us. We will be back again tomorrow night at the same time, so do join us then. But for now, thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.